So welcome everyone to the final in our series of 3 how-to sessions that aim to help you shape policy communications for the time we live in. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Katie and I'm Insights and Relationships Lead at Cast from Clay. So thank you for joining us. First thing I should say is that this webinar is being recorded, so we can circulate the recording afterwards if you want to rewind any of Natalia's golden wisdom. And for those of you who haven't met us before, we are Cast from Clay. We are a communications consultancy that helps public policy experts shape conversations that strengthen democracy. And we work with policy experts, think tanks, NGOs, and universities to better connect policy expertise to the audiences that matter. This session will be led by the brilliant Natalia, who you can see on screen. She's lead consultant here at Cast from Clay. Natalia is a digital comms expert specializing in transforming complex narratives into simple and engaging formats. Previously, she has worked on a wide range of topics, from human rights to chemical weapons bans, from media freedoms to Arctic research. And before joining Cast from Clay, Natalia worked at the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, and she's also a trustee at Neon Digital Arts Festival. So she'll be drawing on this wealth of experience to talk through how to communicate complex ideas in an ever-changing digital space. Before we hand over to her, a quick plug. Sadly, this is the last in our webinar series for now, but if you've been finding these webinars helpful, you may be interested in our training offer. So our training is designed to help you master the craft of research and policy communications, and our first course actually starts next week. It will be all about communicating to persuade. It will be a great accompaniment to today's session, and we'll share the link to sign up and more information in the chat. There are limited spaces, so do make sure you get signed up. And if next week is too soon for you, but you'd like to hear about our further training, do sign up to the training community and you'll hear about further sessions here. So now over to the session. Natalia will talk you through communicating complexity in our changing digital space. And after that, we'll turn over to questions. So please use the Q&A for questions and then the chat for any discussions or introductions. And we'll be sharing our materials afterwards. So now over to you, Natalia. I will turn off my video and give you the floor.
Thank you, Katie. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining this webinar. My name is Natalia. I'm a lead consultant at Cast from Clay, as Katie already introduced me, and I also manage our digital development team. So, the golden wisdom, as Katie said. I'll be talking to you today about how to communicate complex ideas in ever-changing digital space. To be perfectly honest, I'm a little bit regretful of the way I phrased this topic, because I feel like there is enough material for a dissertation in it now, rather than for a 20-minute talk. I think last time when we advertised it was approximately September with all the webinars, and a lot of things even changed after that. So Musk bought Twitter, right? AI took over our lives, and now this ever-changing digital is stretching from the rest of social media, Web3, Metaverse, to all the questions about the AI technology. On top of that, I have the complex ideas in it, right? The question that dates back to John Locke about how do we create and interpret those ideas, those concepts, how do we observe relations, and essentially what is knowledge, right? How do we generate and share knowledge, and what role language has to play in it? So a lot of very interesting questions for policy communicators in here, but I'm afraid we have time for very few of it. So maybe one day we'll put it all together in a more comprehensive Cast from Clay course. But today I will be focusing on how. And not only because Katie asked me to do so, but because I think this might be a useful framework for you of how to think about these questions, and also how to adjust your digital strategy and your digital direction. The way this presentation is structured, there will be 3 key takeaways. Watch out for yellow. There will be 3 brief explanations on why you should think about them, and also some ideas on how you can think about them. Okay, if you're ready, let's get started. It's quite dense, so we're going to get to the first takeaway straight into it. Takeaway number 1, don't bring old models to new digital. So one thing is quite obvious in the technological advancement is that policy and research organizations are struggling to keep up, right? But who doesn't? no one really understands what's happening, but some are trying a little bit better than others. So I'm gonna just briefly look into like what is changing as we see it. I was trying to find a good TikTok video to illustrate this slide, but then I found something a little bit better. This is a Wikipedia list of most popular TikTok videos. And just take a look at the post descriptions. Right? Drawing of mouth, 50 million likes. Person barking at dog, 40 million. Peeling a banana, opening a car door, chipmunk eating nuts. My favorite was dog painting a flower. And the dog actually did a very good job. I don't know why only 30 million likes it had, so it was at the bottom of the list. These are generally very interesting lists across all major channels. I would recommend you to explore them out of curiosity. Twitter is doing a tiny bit better with some media, a few politicians, but the general trend remains. And it creates the feeling that there is very little space left for complexity. Digital has become this extremely fast-paced environment, fast-foody in a way, and our attention is changing, our focus is changing. Social media is now this entertainment center, right? It's voyeuristic, it's predisposed to disinformation, it's addictive, and it's absolutely infinite. Just think how much content is out there. Having said that, there is still appetite for complexity, especially with so many global issues and conflicts. And take COVID-19 or war in Ukraine. People want and need the access to credible information and research and analysis to help them actually navigate everything that's going on around the world, right? To connect the dots and how to think about these issues. So what's changing? Changing is communication model, right? The way you can get people attention, the way you can engage people in your research. It has become much more confusing, polluted potentially, and significantly more crowded. So this is the old traditional sort of policy communications model that very much focused around the reports, the outcome. I'm not going to stop here for a very long time, but this is just a traditional way, right? You do research, you produce a report, you do a couple of briefings, a few tweets. Unfortunately, this doesn't work anymore. A few years ago, Castrum Clay redid this model, and we produced another one, 21st century policy communications model. I meddled with it, so this is not the one that you'll find on our website, but I wanted to draw attention to a few changes here. So we always, of course, put the story at the center. So you always need to know who you're communicating to and what are you communicating about, and relate to people in a very personal level. But on this slide, I'm not going to go through everything here, but I just wanted to draw your attention to the separation between short form content and long form content, and also to the variety of available formats out there that are quite seriously underused in our field. So how do you get accustomed to these models? Step number one, accept the hard truth about influencing. There is a funny thing about influencing. The more you commit to doing social good, the more likely you to develop a blind zone, lose the sense of what the real world is like. And when you work for a sector for a really long time, and it's quite similar in my job, things become automated, right? We presume a lot and we don't always question how others see them. That is why I think the sector should go through what Kant described as enlightenment. Ability to think for oneself, rely on one's intellectual capacities in determining how to believe and how to act, what to believe and how to act. Or what I call unbubbling. Necessity to recognize that we are in a bubble, right? That our judgment is often based on opinions and practices that take place in the sector, and whether it's NGO sector, policy sector, think tankers, right? Recognizing that the world outside our bubble doesn't always care and doesn't always have time for what we do and what we have to say. They might care about the issue, but not necessarily about us. And you can, of course, publish a very detailed PDF report with an explanation why they should care. But this might not be the way to convince them. There are billions of PDFs out there. Unless you print it, it's the most inaccessible format. And as you've seen before, the attention, the way we process information is changing, right? You can't expect people to sit down and read a 50-page PDF. So your first step should be critically questioning whether this is the right way to make an impact. So tip number 1 from Kant himself, sapere aude, dare to be wise. As Kant said, it's not a matter of understanding, it's a matter of courage, right? The ability to say that we are going to do things differently. You will not have all the answers straight away, but what you can do is channel your uncertainty into creativity. No matter how scary and weird TikTok is, it's just a comms tool. It's just an instrument. And if you deconstruct the attraction behind these short messages, right? How are they structured? Why people like them? How they work? You can always find a way to use them. You will not be able to fit in your full research into a 15-second video, and you don't really have to. The short form is there for you to grow your audience, to connect with people, and also to attract attention to your other content. There is a misconception there that if something is short, it lacks nuance, and it's not entirely true. It just means that you have to be a little bit more creative with the form and with your language. And this is probably the good time for you to see the video that's on the screen right now. You should be able to hear.
My mate says that the heat wave convinced him of climate change. I said, what about 50 years of peer-reviewed science, mate?
This is by Ollie Frost. He's one of the climate creators to watch, as announced by Harvard School of Public Health, among many others. And if you're looking for some, this is the link to actually check out. But this is just a nice example of how the short form can just be quite humorous and a nice way to relate to your audience. And also a good point to mention that I'm not really advocating for you all to go away and open TikTok channels. Absolutely no. Experiment with what you already have on your channels. The short form works on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever you have. And take a look at who is already out there, who's creating content and can help you reinforce your messaging, right? Collaborate with content creators. Just today, we published a really good blog. I recommend you to check it out on our website about how you can actually make this happen, and you don't necessarily need to produce everything yourself. Right, let's move, sorry. Step number 2 is invest in your long form. You need to make your long form significantly more attractive. And surprising amount of policy organizations, research organizations use YouTube purely as an archive. And this is the second largest search engine in the world, right? 2 billion people use YouTube. And it's really a shame to miss out on such opportunity, especially when there are so many different formats you can use, right? From just making a video version of your podcast or to live discussions. And some require more production quality than others, more money, more investment, more time. But if you create a strategy, invest in advertising, you will have to do it to promote your content. It can actually be an amazing tool to deliver your messages, not only to deliver your messages, but to shape the environment of how people think about these issues. And the last piece of advice in this section is get ahead of the tech. Right, as defined by Atlantic, and most important job skill of the century is how to talk to AI. The future of AI is shaping up right now, and we need experts both using and analyzing this technology. Policy and research organizations will have to play a really important role in fact-checking and in keeping society after potential bias and knowledge loops, right? But there is no way you can do it unless you use it. And aside from the ethical worry, there's a bunch of great tools already out there that can help you produce better content in a short period of time and with smaller resources. And they can also inspire you to think of what the future of digital looks like. So experiment. I hope you had enough time to watch the GIF from Hitchhikers of the Galaxy. So I'm going to move to the takeaway number 2. And this is be your own media. Policy organizations often work really hard to get mentioned in the media and raise your agenda with the news outlets. which is an absolutely justified endeavor and should be part of your comms strategy. However, media is still very much governed by what sells, right? While a lot of topics in our industry are not often newsworthy, right? They're quite hard to gain clicks on. This doesn't mean that you should give up. Absolutely the opposite. You should medialize your own content. Make it more accessible, more engaging, gain your own followers, and make journalists part of them. Make them watch out for good stories and for good information and data. This is the why part, but we don't really have time to discuss how media forms opinions, controls public space. I'm sure you have your own views on that. But I would encourage you to consider this quote by Zizek from his book, Pandemic, COVID-19 Shapes the World. Shakes. Where he writes, one interesting question raised by the coronavirus epidemic, even for non-expert in the statistic like me, is where does data end and ideology begin? And I can feel that a lot of experts in this room were probably focused on the word epidemic and why did he use it instead of a pandemic? I have no idea, but I'd like you to focus on the different question here. And the question about data and ideology, because we quite often hear when we work with research policy organizations, right, that we just publish data and we let data speak for itself, as if when you publish it, it lends itself in the vacuum. And what Zizek asks us to recognize is this existing beliefs, this ideologies, frames that people use when they interpret this data and this information. As Lippmann said, people are more apt to believe pictures in their head that come to a conclusion using critical thinking. And what I'd like you to think about here is what is your role in reshaping these messages, especially if you're looking to achieve societal or policy change or influence policy change. And this is a significantly bigger task, right? You can't achieve societal change, policy change, and challenge those frames already exist for centuries. If you do it just with publishing one report or one news article. It requires you to rethink your entire strategy, how you publish it, why you publish it, and how you expect people to engage with it. And this is one of the projects that I'm most excited to launch, hopefully in a few months' time. We worked with Inkstick on their current website, and now we just did a refresh. And when I talk about medialization of policy content, they are a great example. This is how they describe themselves. I'm just going to jump to the bottom of this paragraph, where they say, we can't help feeling that most of today's national security and foreign policy outlets are written by and for the same set of voices in the same boring tone. Inkstick is foreign policy for the rest of us. And they are indeed creating content about really complex issues in a very accessible, very relatable, and very human way. And that is why my advice for you is drive change, not papers. Focus on people who you're talking to. Few pieces of advice of how you can go about it is, first of all, start with your website, right? Rethink your content. We've already covered some of it about the formats that you can use. Become more accessible, easy to find, easy to navigate, most importantly, easy to understand. You should think about your website as a platform, not as an archive, again, not as a repository. Curate your content, help people find it, invest in SEO. Google search drives links to your website. And make sure your design is user-friendly. Make sure that people enjoy using your website and spending time on it. Invite different people to write for you. Promote diversity, diversify how you sound and what you're trying to say. And make sure you focus on the right thing. A lot of work in policy comms often geared toward this big reveal, right? This large publication, one event, one high-profile visit, while the rest is usually slightly more miscellaneous comms. Try to revert this. Make sure that you're up to date with what's going on around you and just be present. Don't stall on refining and rewriting your messages if the situation is gaining attention now. You should already know what your values are what you stand for, and what you're trying to say. This should all be in your strategy. Okay. And this is the third key takeaway. We're almost there. Search for an easy solution. And we're going to take a little break here with Wally. Imagine internet, right? The endless universe of content, material, innovation, campaigns, websites, apps, algorithms, services, products. There is already so much out there that you can use without needing to invent the wheel. So I would like to challenge you. Next time you have an idea, do not launch another Twitter profile from scratch. Think about what is already out there or who is already out there that can help you achieve your goal in a short period of time. Take this shortcut. But to do so, you need to work together. There is a lot of strange competition going on in our sector, and this is why nothing substantially is changing. We have a lot of people talking about similar things, but they're not somehow coming together. Sometimes I find it quite entertaining to think about what if Jeff Bezos, instead of his capitalist empire, created the class action on climate. Like imagine this global fast operating platform that brings together all climate campaigns, innovations, discussions, data sets just to your doorstep, maybe with a little bit better design. That's not the world we live in, but maybe we can work together toward that kind of world. And this is another classic classroom clay graphic, previously of 4, and I'm going to add the 5th, stages of digital maturity. It has a lot of criteria of how to evaluate your progress in digital comms and how to grow your ambition. And I really want to make it the 5 stages and add it cluster. Work together. Make sure you have a plan for how your messages will be shared. If you notice, the partner engagement is at the very top of the model that I showed before. It is because it's really important to think in advance about who you want to bring on board, who you can bring on board to share your ideas and make them more impactful. And this is just one way to think about it. Place yourself in a bigger context, right? Think who is already doing what you do. You probably already know that by now, but for example, you can think about foundations, political parties, think tanks, universities, grassroots. Then make a list of people who think what you do. They might have a different profession, but they are on the same page. There can be NGOs, local governments, communities, awards, maybe some individuals. And then go broader. Look for people who do a totally different thing, but their work can contribute to your cause. And you can find the right incentive to bring them on board. For example, that could be corporates or creatives or tech or media, right? You've seen how many people in private companies engaged and supported Ukraine. More and more companies now have corporate social responsibility policies engage in social issues, environment protection. And this might be your entrance point to audiences who have significantly bigger policy influence. And this is all I have for you today. This is just a recap of what we discussed. If you have any questions, please do let me know.